What's going on, guys? Mike here, the Detroit Borg, with one more MacBook Pro to take a look at, and that's the 13-inch MacBook Pro with a touch bar. So I took a look at the baseline model and the 15-inch model with touch bar, so finally we're taking a look at the one that sits between them. So this retails for $1799 to start, which is a $300 premium over the non-touch bar baseline MacBook Pro. Now, because I've covered these extensively in two previous videos, I really want to focus on the difference between the baseline and the touch bar model to see if that $300 is worth the upgrade. So getting to the unboxing of the MacBook Pro, pretty familiar now because I've done this a few times, but of course we have to remove the plastic, and once we lift up the lid, first thing we'll see here is our space gray MacBook Pro. So it's a pretty familiar color now, but again, that's new for the MacBook Pro for 2016. So removing the plastic, there is one more piece of material to remove, and that is a piece of paper protecting the glass display. So we can go ahead and pull that off, and as you can see, as soon as you open up the lid, the computer boots up. That's a new characteristic of the latest MacBook Pros. Of course, just like the 15-inch model, we do have Touch ID for the first time built in here, so you can train your finger to the Touch ID sensor, which allows you to unlock the MacBook Pro, use Apple Pay, or even authorize purchases on iTunes. Getting to the accessories, once again, we have that familiar packet, which does include some paperwork, including a set of Apple stickers. Gone is a microfiber cleaning cloth, so we don't see that anymore with this generation. Also included is our power supply. This is 61 watts and has a USB Type-C connector. This allows you to connect the included USB Type-C cable, so once again, no MagSafe here. That has been completely eliminated with the newest generation of MacBooks. So just to summarize, what's new with this generation, of course, it's thinner, lighter, more powerful with a brighter display, a shallow keyboard, along with a huge multi-touch glass trackpad with Force Touch. The keyboard is a significant change here. The keys are wider, flatter, and much more shallow, and use a new second generation butterfly mechanism borrowed from the MacBook. Now, it is much louder than the previous generation, but it's much more clicky, so it does make more noise, but it definitely feels a lot better. I'm a big fan of this keyboard because it's very fast and responsive, and you can type on this very lightly. The other big change here are the ports. Now, we do get a headphone jack, but we get 4 USB Type-C connectors that also support Thunderbolt 3. So gone is DisplayPort, HDMI, SD, and of course USB Type-A, so you're going to need to use some adapters. But these are very high-speed ports, and they're very flexible, so they're very future-proof, but of course you're going to need to adapt them for most situations. Now, there are quite a few differences between this and the baseline model, so $300 is more than just adding a touch bar. It also adds a much faster processor. We go from 2 GHz to 2.9 GHz. That's still a dual-core i5, and dual-core is the best you can do with the 13-inch Pros. We also get faster RAM. On the base model, it's 1866 MHz. On the upgraded model, it's 2133 for both 8 and 16 gig configurations. We also go from Intel's Iris Graphics 540 chip to the 550 chip. And we also get 2 extra Thunderbolt 3 ports, 2 on each side. On the standard model, we just have 2 on the left side. There's also a difference in the speaker design. On the baseline model, we have front-facing speakers, and on the upgraded model, although we have speaker grills, instead the speakers are coming out of the vents along the back side of the MacBook Pro, which marks another difference. So we don't have these vents along the baseline model, but we get them on the upgraded model for better cooling. And for some reason, the baseline model has 2 microphones, while the upgraded model has 3 microphones. Another difference is in the favor of the baseline model. So the baseline gets a 54.5 watt-hour battery versus 49.2 watt-hours. And although that sounds significant, the estimated battery life is still 10 hours between the both of them. So you might get a few more minutes out of the baseline Mac, but it's not clear. There's a few other visual differences here. So for example, the USB-C ports on one side are farther down on the touch bar version versus the standard version. The other difference here is that the function row is taller with the touch bar. So you'll see the speaker grills are slightly taller. Unfortunately, I do think this speaker design does negatively affect the sound quality out of the MacBook Pro. So compared to the baseline with front-facing speakers, the upgraded touch bar model sounds a little more hollow and distant and a little more muffled, so they don't sound as clear and crisp. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the differences. What's up, guys? Mike here, the Detroit Borg, and about a couple of weeks ago I took a look at the baseline 13-inch MacBook Pro, which wasn't terribly exciting because it didn't have the touch bar and Touch ID. This time we're going to take a look at a fully spec'd out 15-inch MacBook Pro with the touch bar and Touch ID. So there is growing concern, however, that this new keyboard is much louder than the previous generation, and indeed it is. But of course that feels a lot better when you're typing. Now I can definitely see where in some situations in a quiet room this is going to be more irritating than the previous generation. So what I'm going to do is let you listen to the difference to see if you can tell. So when it comes down to performance, we are seeing some respectable CPU gains. That's thanks to the new Skylake processors, which are clocked at 2.9 GHz versus 2.7 on the previous model. But there is a huge improvement in terms of graphics performance, so any 3D accelerated or GPU intensive apps should take advantage of it. We also get much faster SSDs, doubling the performance of the previous model. But if we look at the current baseline MacBook Pro versus the Touch Bar model, you can see there really isn't a significant gain here in terms of benchmarks, either in CPU or GPU. Now, if we compare this to the 15-inch MacBook Pro, the big advantage to the 15-inch beyond its size is the fact that it also has dedicated graphics, which you cannot get on the 13-inch model. You just have integrated graphics. So if you want the most power, especially for GPU-intensive apps, you're definitely going to focus on the 15-inch model. But otherwise, you have most of the same features, 4 USB Type-C ports. The only difference here is that the ones on the right on the 13-inch model aren't as fast as the ones on the 15-inch. Now, I did cover the Touch Bar in my 15-inch MacBook Pro review, and I'll leave that linked in the description below so you can see more coverage on that. But if you're not familiar with it, it's basically an OLED strip that replaces the function row. Now you can still use the function keys, but again, they're virtual keys and they sort of move around and change depending on the situation. Now if you want to go back to the standard function row, you can enable that under settings, and that will fix those function keys toward the top so they don't disappear when an app pops up. Now in many ways, I actually prefer the implementation of these function keys over the standard physical keys. So for example, if you want to adjust the volume, just tap and hold on the volume button and slide your finger. So this allows you to more quickly and more precisely control either the brightness of the screen or the volume output, which I think is better than hitting those D10s on the keypad. There's also the escape key on the left side, and it is a virtual key, so it does disappear depending on what touch bar feature is being used, but there's always an X there to get rid of it so you can get access to the escape key. The rest of the touch bar is set aside for apps. So basically apps dictate what controls you see here, and you can customize this, and it's pretty easy to do so. But basically these are tools that allow you to interact with the app in a new way. So for example, you can get some media controls with a scrubber that allows you to scrub through video. You also get some markup tools for bolding, italicizing, or underlining text. We also have some of our browser controls, so we can open up a new tab or scroll through our open tabs and even see a preview of each tab within that touch bar. We also have shortcuts to our favorites and many more features. Some other cool features include Final Cut editing tools, or if you're writing a message, you can actually bring up an emoji keyboard that allows you to select your emoji or even long press on them to select a different skin color. We also get a little bit of iOS, so if you're composing a message, you have the option to bring up some word completion to anticipate what you're typing. Now for me, it's pretty easy to spend your money and tell you that all the features built into the Touch Bar version of this laptop are worth the $300 price increase, except the speakers. But they're definitely not essential, and many of these features still require some maturing to see if they're actually worthwhile. But I think the bigger question here is that the baseline MacBook Pro should probably be $100 or a few $100s cheaper than it is. But what do you guys think of the 13-inch MacBook Pro? Personally, I'm a big fan of it. I love the touch bar, I love this keyboard and the trackpad, and of course, the display is fantastic. It's very lightweight, very powerful, and gets the job done for me in most situations. So this is definitely the laptop I'm going to be carrying more often than any other. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this look at the 13-inch MacBook Pro. If you did, please give it a thumbs up to let me know, and I'll see you again in the next video.